pretty normal day in DC, I'm happy to report. It's not 85 degrees in October. Thank goodness. Well, we so appreciate everyone taking time out of the middle of your day today to be here with us and our fabulous all-star lineup of panelists. Let's go ahead and dive in as people are trickling in. We have advocates from across the country, local leaders, decision makers joining us to hear about this incredible moment in which we find ourselves. I know it is a challenging moment for sure, but if you are like me and you have recently read Bill's new book, you also know that it's not all bad news. And we're going to talk about some of the opportunities we have to make sure we continue driving this transition to clean energy as fast as we possibly can. So thank you again for joining us. My name is Lena Moffitt. I'm the executive director of Evergreen, and I'm going to be your host today. I'm so excited to talk to you about this moment in which we find ourselves and really highlight some opportunities that you can seize as advocates and local leaders across the country that even in this hard moment can still help make a difference in speeding this transition that is just gaining momentum around the globe to clean energy, bending that curve of emissions down and tackling the climate crisis. So before we get too far into it, I am going to introduce our incredible lineup of speakers. I am so thrilled and honored to have with us today Bill McKibben, who really needs no introduction, but he certainly deserves one, so we're going to go ahead and do it anyway. I'm proud to call Bill a longtime friend and mentor of mine. He's one of the original climate advocates, founder of 350.org and Third Act, and the author of over 20 books, including Here Comes the Sun, which again, if you haven't gotten a copy yet, this is not just a Stumping for Bill's book event, although it really can and should be. Go out and get a copy. Do yourself a favor. We all need a shot of inspiration and galvanization and a reminder that momentum and history is on our side as we make this transition to clean energy, so check it out. Bill's work regularly appears in outlets from The New Yorker to Rolling Stone. He has a wonderful Substack called The Crucial Years, and he just helped organize the Sunday Day of Action last month to spread the good word about the phenomenal rise of cheap, clean solar power with events and actions all across the country. Bill, thank you as ever for your leadership and using your prose just so beautifully to inspire people and galvanize them to get off the couch and out into the streets and increasingly into the PUC commission meetings. We are so grateful to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
Next, we have Ari Matusiak. Hi, Ari. So nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Ari is an entrepreneur, builder, and leader who's dedicated his career to delivering a better future we can all share. He is co-founder, president, and CEO of Rewiring America, one of Evergreen's favorite partners, and it's a national organization forging the affordable path to an all-electric future. He was a founding partner at PVG, a climate solutions consulting firm, and chief strategy officer at Renovate America, a leading residential energy efficiency and renewable energy financing platform. And from 2011 to 2014, he served in the Obama White House as special assistant to the president, focusing on job creation and economic competitiveness. He co-founded and co-chaired Young Invincibles, a nonprofit promoting economic opportunity for young adults, where he helped drive passage of the Affordable Care Act, particularly the inclusion of the provision allowing young people to stay on their parents' insurance until age 26. Ari, thank you for that and all of your great work. It's so nice to have you here today.
It's wonderful being here.
And last but certainly not least, we have Matt Traldi, the co-founder and CEO of Greenlight America, the leading grassroots campaigning organization getting large-scale clean energy projects built across the United States. He's one of the co-authors of The Indivisible Guide and a co-founder of the Indivisible organization, for which he was named one of Time Magazine's 25 most influential people on the internet. Previously, he worked for more than a decade in the labor movement as an organizer, researcher, policy director, and secretary-treasurer of a local union. In 2020, Matt led the Democracy Defense Coalition's Election Crisis Boiler Room, a movement-wide coalition effort involving hundreds of organizations, subsequently founding the Election Sabotage Response Network, something that is more needed now than ever. Matt, thank you so much for joining us. We're so thrilled to have Greenlight on the scene, too, filling such an important role. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me. Wonderful to be here with you.
Excellent. Okay, a couple quick housekeeping notes before we get started. We're going to spend the next 30 minutes or so hearing from our phenomenal lineup of panelists, and then we'll save about 10 minutes at the end for Q&A from the audience. If you have a question in the meantime, check out the Q&A box at the bottom. Feel free to put your question in there anytime. We will do our best to either get it answered during the presentation or at the end when we go to questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive in. Bill, I want to start with you just to take a step back and set the stage for a moment, particularly thinking about the moment in which we find ourselves right now. In your beautiful new book, Here Comes the Sun, you talk about this remarkable growth of clean power. One of the things you say that I loved was in the past few years, we now live on a planet where the cheapest way to produce energy is to point a sheet of glass at the sun. It is so cool and such a neat way to put it. You're so good at simplifying things in a way that really just jumps off the page. And our audience deeply understands the crisis that we are in when it comes to climate change and the stakes that we're facing and the importance of driving this transition to a clean energy economy. But could you lay it out for us, just talk a little bit about this incredible inflection point that we are facing?
Absolutely. First of all, Lena, what fun to be with you. We are old comrades in arms from many, many struggles, and many, many thanks for all your work. And what a pleasure to get to be with two heroes like Ari and Matt on this thing. And with everybody at Evergreen, you guys have been heavily responsible for the fact that, that there are some good things happening amidst the bleak ones here in our nation. Look, I've obviously, so you can tell by my hairline, been at work at this a long time. I wrote the first book on what we now call the climate crisis, what we then called the greenhouse effect back in the 1980s. For almost all that time, we lived and operated in a world where fossil fuel was relatively cheap, especially if you didn't count the damage it did to the planet, and renewable energy was relatively expensive. And that, constrained what we could do and how we had to work politically and whatever else. We're now in a very different world as of 4 or 5 years ago. You know, to live in a world where it's cheaper to make power from the sun and wind than it is from setting things on fire is a potentially epochal moment for human civilization. Really allows us to move in stunning ways, not just to deal with the climate crisis, but to address the fact that 9 million people a year die from breathing the combustion byproducts of fossil fuel. That's one death in 5 on this planet. And to address the fact that, as long as we depend on a resource like fossil fuel that's only available in a few places, we're going to have plutocrats and oligarchs who control those places and abuse their power and wealth. The prospect of a world where everybody can make the energy they need in their own place is a remarkable shift for our planet and would do more than anything I can think of to erode and subvert the kind of authoritarianism crisis that we're confronting at the same time as the climate crisis. So the good news is that this is surging around the world. The planet generates a third more power this autumn from the sun than it did last autumn. We've hit the steep part of this S curve, and it's remarkable to watch. In China, in May, they were producing 3 gigawatts worth of solar panels, putting up 3 gigawatts worth of solar panels a day. A gigawatt's the rough equivalent of a large coal-fired power plant. They were putting up one of those every 8 hours, okay? So the question is not, can we do this? We can, at scale, at speed. The question is, will we? Around the world, I think the answer to that is largely yes, though we have to speed it up. We're beginning to see remarkable change, especially across the developing world, as country after country realizes that they can be free of the curse of depending on imported fossil fuel and instead set up their own energy systems. But of course, in this country, above all, we face extraordinary pushback because the news that we're sharing today is good for everybody except if you own an oil well or a coal mine. And then
Mhm.
it's really bad news. And sadly, we have a political system that's easily gamed. Um, you'll recall that last year, candidate Trump explained that for a mere $1 billion from the fossil fuel industry, he would let them do anything they wanted. They come up with something like half that much if you add up all the advertising and lobbying and donations. Clearly, that was plenty because we're now doing incredibly dumb things in this country. Just last week, shut down work on a 6 gigawatt solar plant in the Nevada desert that would have powered 2 million homes, even as electricity prices across the country are skyrocketing. Um, so, our job here is to figure out how to make sure people understand why those electricity prices are skyrocketing, what the cure for that is, and what the possibilities are for running this country in ways that benefit almost all its people who don't happen to be oil company executives.
Yeah. Well, thank you for laying it out so clearly and beautifully as you always do, Bill. I think you're so adroit at being honest about the stakes that we face and the hard landscape, but that there still are opportunities for folks to seize to help keep driving momentum. And like you noted, Evergreen, we've worked for a long time on policy at the federal level. I'm a big believer that we need federal policy to really tackle this crisis. And that's looking pretty dire right now with
Yep.
these, as you called it, I think the immaturity of our politics at the federal level right now. Absolutely. And I am so heartened by the fact that people are not giving up. We have so many advocates across the country, like those on the call today, and just average Americans who recognize this crisis. And even if it's not about climate, if it's about skyrocketing electric rates, like you just noted, folks want change, and there are clear ways to make it. I'm curious if given that you could talk a little bit about some of those critically important levers that we can pull. We're going
Sure.
to explore things that individuals can do by helping electrify their homes and grabbing some of those savings while they're still available from the feds. And then second, at the community level, getting clean energy built. What do you see in that landscape as the most important levers that we really should be focused on as advocates?
Abs Absolutely, Lena. I mean, yes, we do have to keep an eye on the federal level, hard as it is, and I hope everybody's preparing for No King's Day this weekend. I know I am. Um,
Absolutely.
but there's a lot to be done at the state and local level, and we're all figuring out ways to do it. As we come out of Sunday, many thanks to all who helped with that, 500 events across the country. Um, one of the things we're focused on is permitting for rooftop solar, for balcony solar, or for community solar. Um, these are fights we should be able to win, I think, in place after place after place, both blue and red. Um, and we're also at third act, like Evergreen, have a deep devotion to figuring out how we get the public utility commissions across the country on side and doing the right thing. Again, I think this is highly possible. I think these are bureaucracies that have been protected mostly by their own boringness for decades. And we're training up lots and lots of people my age who are willing to go and spend Wednesday and Thursday sitting there with a basket of knitting or a crossword puzzle book and also paying witness and testifying and making sure that it's not just utility lobbyists capturing these vitally important beachheads. So there's tons of work to be done in the streets, in the halls of power, all over the place. I'll just give you one quick story just to let people know that this is not hopeless work. Across Europe, the last couple of years, people have put up 3 or 4 million of these balcony solar rigs. Um, they're beautiful and easy. You just plug them straight into the wall. No electricity required. Perfect for apartment dwellers. And illegal everywhere in the US, except that progressive bastion, the state of Utah, which passed enabling legislation by unanimous vote in the state legislature earlier this year on the perfectly sound principle that if it's good enough for Stuttgart, it's good enough for Provo, you know? And now there are hundreds of videos on YouTube of earnest, happy Utahns putting up their balcony solar panels and cutting their energy bills dramatically. That's a reminder that we can work on this across partisan and ideological boundaries and in all kinds of places, and it's what we have to do.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you so much, Bill. All right, I'd love to turn to you with a question now to talk about another realm of opportunities for people who are eager to take action. Rewiring America has done more than I think any other group on the planet to make sure that households, whether folks own or rent, can electrify and can do so in a way that is affordable and accessible. So thank you so much for the whole team at Rewiring, your great work on this front. Affordability is particularly critical right now. It's top of mind for folks on both sides of the aisle. And I'm curious if you could talk with us a little bit about why electrification really is the best option for families, especially as we are thinking about affordability and what kind of trends we've seen since credits and rebates for things that help people electrify via the Inflation Reduction Act have been available. To you, Ari.
Thanks, Lena. And wonderful to be here. I'm sitting in a phone booth, or what I guess they call a phone booth now, and I'm recalling that years ago I did, Bill, you and I did one of these on the run up to the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. So I guess we're in a slightly different position now, and the sort of environs for me were a little more festive at the time. But it's wonderful being here. And I guess just to take a little bit of a step back, I think it's important for all of us to recognize that we're sitting at a time where there's like a convergence of three very powerful forces. There are a couple of other forces at play too, but just to name three, one of them is for the first time, really in 30 years, we have the phenomenon of load growth in this country, where there is increasing demand for electricity. We are projecting to see another 128 gigawatts of load growth over the next 5 years. Just to put that in context, that's almost 20% of current US electricity supply that we're going to add to the grid again in terms of demand. Bill mentioned the Esmeralda site, which was 6 gigawatts of that. That's now sort of on ice. But the problem is that we actually do have a supply problem, and we need to be adding more power to the grid, and that is related to another major trend line here, which is that people's bills are going up. Electricity prices are going up quite a lot, 30% over the last 4 years. But if you look even over the last 6, 7 months, the projections are effectively a vertical line in terms of the increase in people's prices. And the relationship of those two things is really important because 93 gigawatts of the 128 gigawatts of projected load growth are coming from AI hyperscalers in their data centers. And so there really is this sort of dynamic playing out where the question becomes, how am I getting relief for myself and my family? And how do we create an energy system that works for everyone, that can support economic growth for the country, but also sustain sort of shared benefit for all of us? And that sort of connects to this third major force, which is one we've been working on for a long time, which is addressing the climate crisis. Because 42% of energy-related emissions in the United States come from kitchen table decisions that people make about how they heat the air and water in their homes, what kind of cars they drive, how they cook their food, and how they dry their clothes. And so when you combine all of those things together, it actually turns out that electrification is the answer in people's homes to all of those things. It's a way for people to save thousands of dollars a year on their energy bills and to lock in structurally lower bills for decades. We put out a report a couple weeks ago. Households actually are a way to create the capacity on the grid necessary to accommodate the load growth for that is projected from AI and data centers. And it's obviously a way to address the climate crisis overall. And so on the front end, that was a big reason why we partnered with you, Lena, and Evergreen and Bill and Matt and others on sort of articulating the case for the Inflation Reduction Act in the first place and these incentives. But it's also reason why you're seeing so many families, millions and millions of households raising their hands to participate in those. And look, when we worked to get the Inflation Reduction Act passed, a big part of it was to make it last long so that it was there for people when they needed it. So it wasn't this kind of limited time offer. Well, now it's a limited time offer. And we need to make sure that people know about it and can take advantage of it. And so we put together some resources at rewiringamerica.org/save to help families figure out how to best take advantage of those credits. And overall, just best figure out a plan for them and so that they can save money over the long haul. We can talk more about sort of like policy solutions and how that all fits together over time. But I think what's really important is that people know what's available to them. And the thing that I would just say is the response to even the campaign that we've put out has been overwhelming. We've trained up over 1,300 electric coaches who've gone through 9 hours of training to figure out what to do in their homes or to help other people figure out what to do in their homes. And we just had drop-in sessions that we put out over email, offering time with the coach on a Zoom call like this for the last few weeks. And over 1,000 people RSVP'd just to figure out whether they should get this kind of heat pump or that kind of heat pump. And so I think this idea of being in sort of a community conversation about what we can do together and helping each other out in the process is a big part of the moment that we're in, and actually a big part of the way that we build momentum again and build and sort of create that civic energy that we need in the years to come.
Thank you so much, Ari. I think you all have done such phenomenal work on all of those fronts. And I want to underscore the resources you all have built to help folks take advantage of these credits, many of which expire in just a few months. So one of our goals for this conversation today was to help the advocates go back to your organizations across the country, point to these resources, help folks take advantage of those credits before they expire. And I love the coaches that you are building too. So that's another resource that folks can take advantage of. And having helped my parents just get solar on their roofs, I wish I had called upon one of your coaches. So I'm sure you're going to be getting some more calls there too. Is there anything else you want to underscore here about ways that either advocates or states or local decision makers can really help ensure that people are grabbing these savings while they still can these last few months?
Well, I think there's the savings themselves become an effort, and us doing a great job of organizing and leaning into the work that that everybody on this call has been doing for a very long time, and applying those tools and those capabilities to just making sure people have the resources that they need and take advantage of them. I would just say that one of the things about a limited time offer is that supplies run out.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in this context, one of the supplies that is more limited are the people to do the work and install the machines in people's homes. So, if there are folks in communities that want to take action and let people know about what their options are, these credits last until the end of the year. The EV tax credits have obviously expired already, but the end of the year means kind of making a decision in the next few weeks in order to get that done, because you need to basically have the machine installed in your house before the end of the year. So that's one thing to say. I think the other sort of comment I'd make is there's a template here as we think about what we can do all around the country. And the template is, from our perspective, making the household, understanding the household really as energy infrastructure. And if we really think about the household in that way, it becomes a locus of investment that we can be making in order to meet the needs of the grid where we are, to enable people, Bill mentioned permitting costs and all the rest of that, to get sort of obstacles out of the way so people can get access to their own power. But also as a way to kind of get out of a dynamic where we're in a place of scarcity and we're pitted against one another. There is no reason for that. We have all the tools that we need, and frankly, all of the infrastructure that we need in our own homes if we just invest in those. And the benefit to all of us is basically multiplies over time. And so I'm really excited about how we start organizing around this idea of the household as energy infrastructure in a more concerted way. Because at a time when you have all of this convergence of increased demand for electricity and skyrocketing prices on people's bills, policymakers are paying attention to that. They don't get to sort of like let that one go by because people definitely feel the increase in their energy bills, are concerned about it, and are talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was a Washington Post article this weekend. The headline was something like high energy bills may be the sleeper issue of the 2026 midterms, where this is now becoming a very salient political issue. And hey, lo and behold, climate policy actually has a lot to offer on that front in terms of solutions. And Ari, I want to get back to you in a minute to talk more about the data center proposal specifically you all put out, because I think it is so smart how you are thinking about households being able to both decrease energy demand and then also spread it across with power sources on our roofs, et cetera. But first, Matt, let's get back to you for a moment, because I want to hear about the incredible work that your organization is doing, because we need to talk about how to get this clean energy built as well. Evergreen also recently partnered with a conservative organization called the Private Property Rights Institute to interview landowners, local elected officials, and farmers in rural parts of Michigan and Pennsylvania. It was really striking to see how, sort of aggressively pro these openly conservative landowners were about building clean energy on their property and their right to do so, and how many obstacles they're facing. And when they were able to get these projects built, that this was a really important source of revenue, particularly for farmers looking at, okay, I may not have a crop here, but I can think of the solar I'm putting in as this crop that is going to continue sustaining my family. One farmer called it a gift that keeps on giving. And yet, like Bill mentioned in his book, and you all are facing every single day, there is a lot of red tape and opposition to projects popping up, which is why I'm so glad that your group exists and is helping push back on that, because we don't want to see people miss out on these benefits. We need to see this clean energy getting built. And I'm curious if you could just talk with us a little bit about what y'all are seeing out there as you are trying to help these projects actually get across the finish line and get built.
Thanks, Lena. It's such a huge issue. And by way of background, a few years ago, I got to work a little bit on passing the Inflation Reduction Act along with many other folks on this call. And I was one of the co-founders of Indivisible at the time, so working there in that capacity. And right around the same time, my wife and I decided to become parents. And those things kind of combined made me want to really focus in on reducing emissions. That was the place I was going to spend my time. And I learned as much as I could about how to do that, and learned a few things that many of y'all already know. First, in the next decade, 80% plus of the emissions reduction in the US comes from the power sector. Mainly that comes from putting these big clean energy projects on the grid and taking fossil fuels off the grid. And the big obstacle to that transition, it's not the technology. The technology is well established. It's not the cost, as Bill mentioned. Solar in particular is now the cheapest power you can build, and it's not in Washington D.C. actually, believe it or not. It's local permitting. Across the U.S., local governments, often at the county level, they make most of the permitting decisions for these projects. They're typically built by private companies on private land. And a small number of vocal opponents, they show up, they make noise, and supporters aren't showing up at that local level. So clean energy loses by forfeit in these venues across the country. It's very challenging if you're a county commissioner, a local official of some kind, to vote to move forward some big solar project when every single local resident who shows up at the hearing about the project, they've come out to speak to oppose it. It doesn't feel like you're doing your job of representing your community. So those local voices matter so much. Greenlight, we have a very simple strategy for tackling this challenge. We track those critical moments across the US when local and state governments will make the decisions that enable or block clean energy. And we find, engage, and mobilize local residents, folks who actually live within that community, to show up, to advocate effectively and win. This is not rocket science. It's a very simple strategy, but it works. Greenlight, we won our first campaign in January 2024. We've now advanced approximately 15 gigawatts of clean power across the US in the last 22 months. That's roughly 10 times the size of the Hoover Dam, by way of context. So Greenlight alone, 10 Hoover Dams, in the last a little under 2 years.
Wow, congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you. It's amazing. Finally, I know folks have probably read a lot of headlines saying Trump has killed solar, Trump has killed wind, Congress has killed it, all of this stuff. You wouldn't know it from reading the news, but we are actually poised to smash clean energy deployment records over the next few years. Counterintuitively, deployment of clean energy is accelerating right now across the country because developers are rushing to qualify as many projects as they can for the tax credits before they run out. The timing for the tax credits for these big projects is, we have a little bit more wiggle room than we do for the household tax credits. So developers are rushing to get as many across the finish line as possible over the next 2 to 3 years. That means we are in an absolutely critical window for progress with extremely high stakes for US emissions. Here at Greenlight, we're ready to make the most of it and excited to work with everyone on this call to do it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Matt, and congrats on all of that awesome work. I'm so glad you mentioned those clean energy tax credits, because that's one of the things we wanted to point to here too, as advocates are hopefully stepping out into their communities and supporting these projects. We are in this rush. Folks are calling it the fierce urgency of commence construction because of the incredible short-sightedness of the leaders in DC right now. Those credits are going to run out essentially in July of next year. Projects that want to take advantage of them have to commence construction by July. And so helping these projects get that credit is really urgent. And I love that you are getting folks from their communities to go to these meetings and say yes. Are there any other, opportunities or things that you want to underscore for the advocates on the call and those who will see this on social media that you think folks should really seize to help ensure that we are tackling any opposition that we may see at the local level and helping ensure that these projects get built?
Absolutely. And just to say, I think about this every day. Greenlight, our staff, we never speak at hearings ourselves. We're outsiders, right? We don't live in these communities. That's, if anything, it's going to be counterproductive. Would not work. So we exist entirely to support local residents who want to see clean energy in their own communities and to help them win that clean energy deployment. The first thing I would just say for everyone to know is how huge an opportunity there is for each large scale clean energy project. So at one of these county hearings, these are the kinds of places where they're deciding whether to put in a stop sign in an intersection, right? This is the unsung heroes of American government, right? 25 people at one of these might be standing room only. 5 or 10 volunteers showing up to speak out in favor of a solar project, that could win approval for a project. And a mid-sized project, of the type we're talking about, these utility scale projects, that's the equivalent of planting 3.1 million trees. So if you're a volunteer, you're one of 10 volunteers who goes to this hearing, you spend an afternoon, a couple hours there, and you win approval for this project, you personally have planted 310,000 trees in that afternoon. That's pretty fast. That's faster than I can go. That's faster than I think most people can go. So the other thing I just say is opponents are going to show up. That's something we see over and over again. It happens everywhere. Some of them are nice, normal people with totally normal concerns, specifics about the project. Some are ideologues who heard, Trump say that windmills are causing cancer or something like that. But at the end of the day, the number one thing is show up in person. That is how you make the biggest difference. Now, I'd also say here, I'm motivated by climate. And I think everyone on this call is motivated by climate. Many of our volunteers are too. Wind and solar need a lot of land. So a lot of these projects, they get built in rural conservative communities where climate, it might be the reason a volunteer is going to show up, but it's not going to persuade your neighbors. It's not going to persuade the decision makers. So it's really important that folks who want to support clean energy deployment take the time to learn about the incredible economic benefits these projects offer. They're massive taxpayers, sometimes the biggest taxpayers in these communities. They can keep the school open. They can pave miles of roadway that wouldn't be paved otherwise. By the way, your research shows this, Lena, but property rights are also a super, super important argument too. It in one of these communities, if you want to build a 100-foot, 50-foot statue of yourself on your land, people think you should be able to do it. So why not a wind turbine? You want to plant whatever plant you want to plant on your land, you should be able to do it. So why not solar panels? The key thing I would just say here is, we're winning. The volunteers we work with are winning. Winning is fun. And we win by doing what works. We win by using the messages that work. Greenlight is here to help with this. Reach out to us. This is all we do. We run these campaigns. Finally, just to say a quick note about local officials. Local officials have a huge role to play in this set of decisions. The most important thing I would say is this. Our national environment right now is heated. There's a lot of divisive rhetoric, and a lot of things are partisan that shouldn't be. If you are a local official, this is not a complicated kind of thing. All you need to try to do is make sure your community is open for business so that you can benefit from the massive economic opportunity that clean energy deployment offers. And so that any restrictions that are going to be in place, they come from some kind of compelling public interest, something that's really needed by your community, and not by the loudest person who shows up at the hearing who has some kind of complaint. So that's my top ask if you are a local official is, to keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Matt. And thank you for referencing our report. Yeah, it was interesting. We found that one of the most salient themes, issues, policy recommendations was just respect landowner rights. If folks want to have clean energy on their property, let them. And so the second policy recommendation for local decision makers is really streamline and update those local ordinances, and where there are bans or there's too much red tape to let folks do things that they want on their property, get those out of the way and let them, so to speak. That's fantastic, Matt. Thank you. So, Bill, I want to go back to you to talk a little bit about this other venue, PUCs, you've noted are so boring, and yet so much opportunity. I was at Climate Week, like I think all of you were a couple of weeks ago, and I was worried it was going to be a grim affair because it was so different than the year before. But one, it's just so inspiring to be with other folks like yourselves who are brilliant and passionate and dedicated and not giving up, even in the face of what we are facing right now. And then two, to hear so much about PUCs, these sort of untouched subnational regulators who have so much power and influence that if our folks just engaged a bit more, could make a massive difference. So I'm so thrilled to see that Third Act is really focusing on this regulatory body. And I'm curious if you could just illuminate for us a little bit about what you're seeing, what you're learning, and how folks can join you. Oh, you're still muted, Bill.
I think people are finally starting to crack the code around PUCs a little bit, because they're crucially important, but they do inevitably end up in the past captured by the utilities that they're theoretically regulating. And I don't mean that in any, I mean that in hypothetical sense, something like 50% of PUC members used to work at the utility or will work at it in the future. It's the biggest revolving door that we have. But because they're at least theoretically highly data-driven operations, they're the perfect place for people to make data-driven interventions. And what we're finding now is that job is easier and easier because the economics have shifted so dramatically here. If you were setting out to build an electrical system for the country now, you would base it on sun and wind and batteries. That's the cheap way to do this. we have an existing system, but that existing system is constantly breaking down and turning over. So the possibility for pretty rapid replacement with clean energy, especially as Ari notes in a scenario where we're increasing the demand for electricity, is very real and very large. These guys are having to make a lot of important decisions very quickly, and they need people reminding them what makes sense. One of the things that I've found most useful in talking with PUCs around the country is to say, guys, let's look at Texas for a minute, because Texas is putting up solar and wind power faster than anybody else in the country, not out of, I'm afraid, any concern for the climate at all, but out of a deep devotion to the idea that a lot of cheap energy is going to be good for the Texas economy. And for the PUCs, the thing that's most interesting about that is not just the cost, but the fact that it's clearly helped stabilize that grid. Texas used to have a lot of trouble with blackouts and brownouts. That's why Senator Cruz had to take his emergency vacation to Cancun a couple of years ago. But this summer, the Energy Reliability Council of Texas held a press conference at the end of the summer to say, we got through this hot summer without any trouble because we've got now lots of solar and lots of batteries, enough to compensate for the fact that the biggest new coal-fired power plant in the country, in Texas, went down in some kind of accident in April and won't be back up and running until 2027. The idea that that solar and wind are intermittent power and thermal generation is reliable is nonsense. So far, the sun has come up literally every morning, and that's a lot better record than you're getting with creaking old gas and coal-fired power plants.
Amen. And the tax credits at the federal level for storage are going to still be around for a while. They actually wound up extending those. So even better news for ensuring that clean power is that, long, reliable. And it sure is. Okay, we're going to do something fun here. We're going to do a quick audience poll to hear from folks about what their top concern is. We're going to go ahead and put it out there. Folks are going to get the chance to vote right now to hear about what issue is top of mind for them. Electrifying their own house and telling others about it, advocating for policies that make electrification more affordable and accessible, directly supporting local efforts to build clean energy, or advocating for policies that make it easier to build clean energy. So if you are an audience member right now, it's time to look up from your other tiny screen and give this one a click. Let us know which of the top issues is the most important to you. And this is a live poll, so we can see folks inputting their results in real time. Looks like we've got pretty even distribution here so far, that folks are really interested in all of these topics. Ari, we've got a little bit of work to do to make sure that folks want to hear about electrifying their own house and telling others about it. But the other three are all topping out at about 35%, but the top is advocating for policies that make it easier to build clean energy. Okay, that tracks. We've got a lot of clean energy advocates on the call. Makes a lot of sense. We have resources for you. In particular, I want to make sure that we are sending around the report that we just did with the Private Property Rights Institute, looking at local streamlining and permitting reforms that can ensure that local landowners get that clean energy they want. I'm going to click share results here, and folks get to see that. And Greenlight. What a great partner to help ensure that that clean energy that's coming to your backyard, you get to go out and say yes for it and help ensure that it gets built. Okay, so we are to the Q&A portion of our call today, and I want to give audience members an opportunity to ask a question. But Ari, I'm wondering if, as folks are putting in their questions, I could turn to you for the first one, because I am so enticed by this proposal you all just put out. Folks are rightly concerned across the spectrum about the energy hungry data centers, like we've been talking about, and just the incredible spike in demand that we're seeing, largely driven by those AI data centers. And you have this proposal about how those hyperscalers can meet that need by considering households as part of our energy infrastructure network across the country. Can you just dig into the details on that a little bit more, and then, sort of point to some bright spots and maybe how we can support that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it actually relates to the thing people are most interested in talking about on per your poll about clean energy policies, because this can be a policy-driven thing. So the story is AI is a thing there, and it takes a lot of electricity to run those models. And those models are run at a bunch of data centers that get built on a bunch of land in a bunch of places all over the country. We mapped every single data center that is built or proposed in this country and looked at their projected size, and then looked at all of the households in those utility districts, because we have the capability to take down to a household level how much energy they produce and how much energy they would save based on upgrades that they make to their homes. Upgrades like old school electric heated homes going from their inefficient systems to heat pumps, or adding solar or storage to the households. And what we found, we just said, let's see. Wait, if you thought about the household as the energy infrastructure, how much could it do? And it turns out that households collectively, not all households, but there's enough sort of in it from households to cover 100% of the projected load growth from hyperscalers. And what that means, just to put it in context, in the case where the hyperscaler has to go find some other power, what that means is that there's like a social shared cost to that. Even if they're fronting most of the dollars, there's still infrastructure costs that we all bear because it's one grid. And so there's a relationship, and there's much more reporting on this now, that people's energy bills are going up, and there's an association to the load growth from the hyperscalers. And by the way, we haven't even gotten to the part of the story where all of that load comes on. So the projected increases in people's electricity bills could be much more stark.
Mhm.
So in the other case, what you could imagine is the hyperscaler actually directly investing in the households as infrastructure, and getting them new things like the heat pumps and the rooftop solar and the battery storage, providing the capacity on the grid that they need to operate their data centers. But instead of people's bills going up in exchange for that, their bills go down because they got the rooftop solar, the batteries, and the heat pumps. And so it is sort of, one of the examples of a win-win story that we could realize. And so the thing about this is, there's an opportunity to just make that happen. And to put it in context, just to use an example here, in the state of Georgia, there are 500,000 single-family homes that have electric resistance, old school electric heating. If you just put heat pumps in about 40,000 of those homes, you would deliver 400 megawatts of capacity on the grid. I mean, it is like that. It is massive. And if you took the equivalent of what the hyperscalers would be paying for power on their own, you could take out 2/3 of the upfront cost for the household to get that equipment in the first place. So there is an opportunity to design this future in a different way, where the first stop should be us in terms of investment and in terms of sort of solving the dynamics, and frankly not having us sort of pitted against one another.
Mhm.
And so that's the basic gist of the proposal. Just to say one sentence more about how it ties into policy, those PUCs that you all were talking about earlier are a location where the policy making happens around how to structure the tariffs for those hyperscalers when they come to town. And there's a huge opportunity now to have the tariffs be designed in such a way so that the money goes directly to the households, to get these things in a way that sort of like meets the moment. And I think that's critically important, because the other thing about it is, if you want to go get yourself a new power plant, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes several years, and it might not work out. It might, the company might not get you that thing built all the way. It might be delayed or whatever the case. We don't have to wonder about whether the household that says that they want the rooftop solar and the battery and the heat pump are going to be around to get it installed. And you can do that today, not 7 years from now. And so the opportunity is right in front of us, and we should take the win.
Absolutely. It's like a quadruple win here too when you think about climate and that all these states are looking for new sources of revenue as federal revenue is going away for these projects. Getting the hyperscalers to pay for these things is just, it's so brilliant. I love this idea. And all right, I want to follow up. We want to help you make this happen. It's a great idea. Bill, a comms question for you, because I am so struck by how this fallacy of clean energy being more expensive is still so pervasive and it's so sticky. And, of course, we're seeing it from the guys at the federal level, but all the way down, to the very local level. And I think your book has done such a phenomenal job of helping just undercut that sticky fallacy. But what else do you think we need to do as a movement, as advocates, to just help make this tidal wave shift to everyone recognizing that if you want cheap power, the thing you need to do is get that sheet of glass and point it at the sun? How close do you think we are, and what else do we need to do to make that comms shift?
I think the comms shift is a really important thing, Lena. And I think that actually it's easier than it can be done. The problem is that we've thought about this stuff for 40 years as alternative energy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the file folder in which we've stuck it in our mind. And so the shorthand I've been using is we've talked about all this stuff as if it was like the Whole Foods of energy. Nice, but pricey for special people. It's not. What Ari is talking about, well, this is the Costco of energy. It's cheap, it's on the shelf, ready to go, it's available in bulk. It's the obvious, straightforward way. And if we can get that, that's going to be the big political challenge of the next year. The Trump administration is going to try and pretend that the reason that electricity prices are rising is because we're somehow using too much clean energy. Our job is to make it clear that it's obviously because we're using way too little clean energy.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can win that fight, and it really is a fight about comms, and it has to do, among other things, with repeating those talking points over and over and over,
Mm-hmm.
then we're in a very different political position.
Mm-hmm.
But it really is hard even for advocates to understand this. When my book was excerpted in the New Yorker this summer, the thing I heard most from people who'd spent their lives working on this was, I had no idea. I had no idea how fast this was growing. I had no idea how cheap it had become. I think they were still thinking of it as, 2004 solar power or 2011 heat pumps or whatever it was. We're in a very different world right now, and it's exciting to communicate that. It's also possible that environmentalists have somewhat more skilled at recent decades at communicating bad news than good. So it would be useful to work on that just a tiny bit too.
Yeah, we've got to build that muscle, the muscle of communicating good news and saying yes to things. Well, thank you for giving us such good talking points to be out there using. Okay, we only have a few minutes left. We're going to close with a quick lightning round. A question for each of you. Name one thing that anyone on this call can do in the next 7 days to stand up for clean energy in their own home or community. Bill, since you're off mute, let's start with you.
Show up at No King's Day with a big sign talking about clean energy and what it means, explaining that you're one of the reasons you're angry at what's happening in Washington is their destruction of science and their traitorous decision to hand the economic and technical future to China instead of here in the US, where solar cells and commercial wind turbines and everything else was invented. I really do think that that's a key part of this fight for the next 7 days.
Yeah, and it's all related. Ari.
Well, you have a great opportunity. You can sign up today and get going for the next electric coach session and enroll for the 4-week training program to make yourself one of those thousands of people around the country who are a resource to your neighbors and friends, in addition to the work that you do each and every day. And so you can do that by going to rewiringamerica.org and going to the Go Electric tab on our website to sign up. That's a thing you can do right now and be a part of a growing community that is that really is sort of inspiring a lot of action all over the place.
Fantastic. What a resource. Thank you so much, Ari. Matt.
Thank you. I'm going to cheat and offer two. So first, right now, there are communities across the U.S. considering utility scale clean energy projects. And usually local supporters don't know that this is happening. That's kind of in the nature of these campaigns. This fall, Greenlight is piloting a national phone banking program to mobilize public support for clean energy projects. I think we're going to have the link in the chat box. We're going to share that link. Volunteers call and identify clean energy supporters in key communities to connect them to those immediate kind of high impact actions like showing up at a hearing, testifying, submitting comments. It is a very fast moving program. Phone banks are going to be every Tuesday and Thursday. Is very fun and engaging kind of work to do. They include a campaign briefing, training, tech support is needed. I'd also just say if you phone banked for a big election, this is a different kind of experience. Most of the folks you call, they've never heard of these projects. Many of them are grateful we're reaching out. This is not like a swing district where they've put their answering machine on permanently until election day. It's a different experience. Highly recommend it. Second, greenlightamerica.org/resources is the place to go for support finding projects in your own community, getting help from our organizing team, and reading more about large-scale clean energy. We have tons of resources there, and everyone can have the biggest impact in their own community. Highly encourage you to go there, sign up, ask an organizer for help.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Matt. And if folks can check out the resources tab at the bottom of your screen, you'll see all those resources we just mentioned compiled. Let me tick through them really quickly. You can go to that link. You'll see them there, but that's Rewiring America's Save on Clean Energy Hub for things you need to know about electrifying your house. Checking out their new report, Homegrown Energy, how household upgrades can meet 100% of the data center demand growth that Ari and I were talking about. Such an interesting and compelling idea. Sign up for upcoming Greenlight America phone banks, find and support and organize for clean energy in your own community via Greenlight's resource hub, and check out Evergreen's interviews with landowners and local officials, and that includes all of our policy recommendations. So if you take one thing away from this call, it is, don't let the dark forces that are taking over our country convince you that the fight is over. Don't give up your power preemptively. You have so many things that you can do. The fight is not over. Progress can still be made. Look at all of these opportunities that you have right in your home that you can seize on to make sure we continue this transition to clean energy, continue the fight against climate change, and make all of our lives better while we are at it. So thank you all so much for joining us. Thank you to my incredible panelists and to everyone who stayed with us this whole time. It was such an honor and a pleasure speaking with all of you, and I hope we get to speak again soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.